Welcome back to a brand new season of the Teacher Surgery. Let's go. All right. Season 6. We've got Bola, we've got Carl, we've got Sabina in the building. Let's have a round of applause. All right, so we're going to get into it. So, all right, for those that don't know, whenever this comes out, we know what's happened in recent times with, we're talking about, let's just say racial tension and things like that. The question is, does racial bias exist in the classroom? But my thing is, do these tensions trickle into the classroom? These like immigration and racial biases, does it trickle into the classroom, or can parents be said, no, these things they don't exist. It don't happen.
It's a difficult question. I'm happy to sort of kickstart. I think a lot of progress has been made with racial bias. I think we'd be naive to assume that it doesn't exist anymore. I think we all have an element of that underlying at some point. But what we think, um, it's almost if students or teachers have some sort of racial bias, it's difficult to underpin that. But I think what matters more is the way we tackle it. And with the curriculum having British values, tolerance, respect, and that being the core bread and butter of everything we're doing in teaching and learning, I think parents can be rest assured that schools would challenge extreme behavior of any sort. That doesn't mean that people are not open or able to have their own perceptions, but as long as on the surface or the outward, we don't discriminate against anybody's opportunities. And I think schools and colleges are doing a really good job of that, especially in the East London area. And that might be because of the demographics of the parents and the community we serve anyway.
Very diverse.
So I can't speak for all community areas, but I think teachers, educators try really hard to try and address and underpin some of these issues. And the British curriculum, the British values, the British curriculum didn't exist, somewhat a couple of decades ago, and it does now. And I think that in itself is really, it's good. It's moving us in the right direction. That doesn't mean we're not going to have prejudice, don't get me wrong. But I think it's not prejudice, not just about race. Sometimes people are prejudiced because of gender. Sometimes people are prejudiced because of the postcode or the location that you come from. So prejudice will always exist. But as long as it's not implicating on somebody's opportunities, I think that's where we've got to be really clear about what is it that we're expecting. Sometimes you might be, living next to a next door neighbor who has some sort of prejudice against you, and there'll be no reason for it. But that's kind of how humans are to some degree.
Carl, I see you thinking.
Yeah. You have to think before you respond. I agree. I mean, there's two elements to this that we have to remember. As human beings, we are naturally inclined to discriminate, right? That is something that's in our DNA.
Is it?
Okay, absolutely. If you look at it from a sociological point of view,
So racism is natural.
No, it's not natural. What I'm saying, racism is not natural. But what I'm saying is human beings have had to learn how to define what is different. So when we were in the savannas of Africa, we had to learn who was our tribe members and who are not our tribe members. If you're not our tribe member, then more likely, there weren't any police in those days. So you're more likely to be, think that, oh, if this guy, I can't trust this guy, he might kill me. There's no 999.
I learned that in psychology, in-group and out-group.
Yeah, so in-group and out-group. That is just the way that we as human beings, unfortunately, comes from our anthropological, I can't even say that word. You said it for me.
Yeah.
Right, yeah? The anthropological heritage, right? There's a number called Dunbar's number. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah,
It was basically a evolutionary scientist that said that human beings have been adapted, that we can only live in tribes of about 120. That's just the way we were. And then after 120, we start to split off and cause factions. So there's something inherent in our psychology. But that does not mean that... So if we know we've got that glitch in our psychology, in our way of perceiving people, that is why we have to work even harder to be able to deal with it. What we've got to remember, there's two elements to this question. There's the macro, all right, which is society, and then there's the micro, it's dealing with the classroom. What we've seen with the riots in the UK is that you've got three elements which have fanned the flames. You've got the governmental element, you have got the media element, and then you've got the corporate element. And what happened with the riots is that it became a perfect storm. We've had a government, or a previous government, who for 14 years has been doing a lot of dog whistle racism, calling migrants cockroaches, saying send them off the boats, saying we're going to put people in Rwanda. You've got a media element, which again we've seen it, and because of time we won't go through all of the different things, but the way that certain crimes are reported, if one person does a crime of a particular color, it's mental health. If another person does a crime, it's gangs of Asians or gangs of blacks or whatnot, what have you. And then you've got the corporate element, which is the constant discrimination. And what's happened over the years is that kept on going and being fed in to the point where we saw what happened with the riots. So we've got that feeding in. Then you've got the micro element when we're dealing with individuals and people, in the classroom, parents, and dealing with families. So what we've got to understand is that I always say we have to control the controllables. And what that basically means is we can change government by voting, but we've got to understand, especially in the social media generation, and when we're dealing with things like Twitter and TikTok, and as we've seen since Elon Musk has taken over Twitter, there's been a lot more conspiracies and a lot more xenophobic and right-wing comments. But what we have to do is, that's why we have to work on being anti-racist and dealing with those things. Go on.
As I'm looking at that, all of that is I hear it and it makes sense, and I'm like, surely the school should be like a shield, an umbrella that protects our children from all of that government plots and which is all real. How does that, we say that they do, you said that we have to work harder to get past that glitch. We have to work harder to make sure this doesn't go into the classroom. How? What is it that the schools do if this glitch or if this virus of discrimination and racism is happening on a governmental level? How can a school classroom teacher prevent it from happening in their classroom? Surely, what tools is there that's being used?
It comes down to the culture of the school, and it comes down to the ethos of the school. And this is why things like anti-racism is very, very important, because we're all prone to this. We're all prone. So, but it starts from the top, okay? If the school does not have active, because people say, okay, we're not racist, we do all that. Martin Luther King, Martin Luther King put the slide on Black History Month, all that good stuff. Sorry, I don't know why I did it in a Cockney accent. I'm from the East End anyway, so I've got the right to do it. But the school have to be pursuing active anti-racist policies, make sure that the culture, doing things to make sure that everybody feels included and seen, to prevent what we saw over the last couple of weeks, which was shocking. It was like going back to the 1970s.
How about, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's not, I don't think it's in our control as much as we think it is. I think the new generation are very outspoken and they are not tolerating discrimination or racism more so than the older generation, to be absolutely honest with you. And I think the younger generation, especially what I've seen in education, is that they will speak up for it and they will stand up to it. The only thing we can do, it's not a school's responsibility to solely protect, but what we can do is reassure that our systems are in place to tackle any extreme behavior. And that's as much as we can expect from the classroom, because the classroom is a place for learning. And I think we need to focus on that. It is a place for learning, respect, and tolerance. And it's about community, building the community of the people that you serve. So if we just let teachers and education focus on that, the rest is more really comes from your people that you socialize with, your families, the extended family, whoever you might have in your communities. There is a responsibility on more than just the schools to be able to tackle some of these bigger, harder problems. But let's not underestimate, social media, for example. You can do as much as you want in a school, but kids have access to so much more information. And we've got to be mindful of how far can we celebrate in certain events and cultures. Yes, that's great, but I think colleges and schools are doing a lot more than that now, because the kids are holding schools and colleges accountable.
I'm gonna say we're gonna have to get a part 2, because we're gonna have to wrap it up there.
It's part 2.
And we know this is where it's a spicy one, and we know it's a current one, so we're gonna have to do a part 2 of that one, definitely. So yeah, come join us for part 2. But we're gonna go into part 2 of our section and ask our second question. All right, which we're going to get into, talking about discrimination. You mentioned it. So it is, are there too many female teachers in the classrooms? And you know what? Yeah, I've heard this since we were young. People thinking, why is this a problem, right? And people thinking, why is this a problem? But a lot of people say, listen, we hear young boys and there's just not enough male teachers. and there's too many female teachers, or there's an influctuation of them compared to male teachers. Is this true, Bola? Are there too many?
Well, me being in primary school, I think in primary school definitely it's more female dominant. But now I'm in secondary school, I've graduated.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing more male teachers there actually, and I'm quite surprised at that. Um I do think there are more female teachers generally because women are more nurturing,
Mm.
can I say. Men, when
Are
looking
you allowed
for
to say that? We
I
take things for
believe
granted. I'm
so,
just,
right?
Yeah.
Men, when looking for occupation
Yeah.
or work-based stuff, tend to go for more manual
Yeah.
labor and maybe jobs that pay a
No,
bit
by
more.
the way, that is true. When it comes to teaching and nursing, these
Mhm.
are careers often
Definitely,
oversaturated by
100%.
women. Yeah.
And I think the male aspect in teaching and working in schools, I think there's a lot of things that maybe put men off,
Mm.
like being accused of sexual
Okay.
abuse
Yeah.
and all those different
Yeah.
things. So I do think that's probably why women
How do we
tend to-
encourage? I'm going to give it to you two, but I'm asking, how do you encourage more men to get into teaching? How would you do that?
See, me, I would encourage men to get into teaching, to do more things like mentoring, because I believe like older teenage boys need that male role model more so. Not necessarily a teacher per se, but mentoring and behavioural, those kind of areas I think men would be
Yeah.
better at.
I think some jobs naturally just are more dominated by a certain gender, but that's
Yeah.
okay because we are when we're asked the question, we're hearing the words too many females in teaching, but that's a good thing, you know. Or we're hearing how can we encourage more men? But if they don't want to, that's fine too. I think teachers should become teachers when they understand that you've got to put all your problems aside and you've got to be present for those learners in that classroom because a lot of them don't have a stable
No,
family
but
or stable background. They come into school to feel
I'm
protected.
going to challenge you, Sabina.
Yeah.
You know why? Because I'm going to be devil's advocate. And I have heard over the grapevine that a lot of boys get in trouble. Young T was here a minute ago, right? And during that section, it was mentioned that there sometimes can be cultural clashes, but there can also be gender-specific cultural clashes, where boys can be boisterous, they could have things like ADHD, they could be loud.
But what makes us think that a female teacher can't deal with that?
But then I've seen that there's sometimes when a male teacher will just understand that that boy is just boisterous and loud and they're play fighting, and sometimes the a female teacher might say, "Oh, you detention," whereas
yeah.
another
No, not at all. Teachers go through a whole degree to get to qualify as teachers. And part of that teacher training is understanding behaviors. Remember, pedagogy backdates to the 18th century. What we're doing today is nothing new, but what we keep doing is provide that training for teachers to understand those challenges and behaviors. You know, some would argue, therefore, Des, that actually a learner with additional support requirement needs more of a nurturing personality, and that typically would come more from females. Having a lot of female in the teaching profession is a good thing. It can never be something that is put down. Teachers, whether you're male or female, as long as you are qualified and you keep up with the training, will always be a good teacher. So that's really the I think parents would appreciate
I've got
a good teacher.
Got a chess piece for
Full
you.
stop.
But I'm gonna move it. I've got a checkmate for you as well. I'm gonna come back to you if we got time. Go on. What's your thoughts?
Wait. No, I'm just absorbing. I'm absorbed. Now you go to these guys because
Let me give
Bola
you
stole all my thoughts. Anyway.
let me give you the checkmate. I remember in previous seasons, we spoke about gender specific schools and gender specific teaching, right? Do you think that there's a positive from that, from all boys being in a boys' school being taught by men, and women being in a women's school being taught by women? Do you think
No, I remember,
positives?
and I remember that season, Des, when you asked me that question, and my response to you was, as a teacher, I don't see it as a positive or negative. I think teaching experience should be focused on the teaching and the quality of teaching and learning in the classroom.
You did say that.
But I said to you, as a mother, I am more inclined to wanting my daughter to go to an all-girls school. I may not choose to do that, but I would think there is a part of me that thinks maybe she'll be more safer in an all-girls school or not have the male distraction of the other boys. That's not a reflection of the teachers.
That's a good
We are
point.
hearing such bad press around teachers and around paedophilia or grooming. And I think we've got to not paint all teachers with the same paintbrush. And it would be really sad if parents were worried about the professional conduct of teachers because of the few minority cases where they have let it down. They have let down the profession. Those that have come in the newspapers or tabloids for negative reasons, for example, exploiting a young child. But that's not where teachers don't go into the profession for that.
Yeah.
So let's remind parents that almost all teachers care about the children and go into the profession for good reasons. The few that have gone into the tabloids and newspapers for negative press, that's unfortunate, but there are bad people everywhere.
there's bad
That
apples.
does not depict teaching and learning and the caliber of teachers that we have. I just want to add that the teaching job is by far the hardest.
Yeah.
And I think we need to, we need to be praising and understanding how difficult the profession is. Teachers today are not what they were 20, 30 years ago. 20, 30 years ago, it's teaching the curriculum. I've got to say, teaching the curriculum. I've got to say, it's teaching the curriculum, getting the examinations done, job done. Today, they are counsellors, they are support mechanisms, they are role models in so many different aspects. The teaching profession is difficult. Let's not paint them with a negative paintbrush because of the few that have let it down.
There you go. Thank you.
We need to add that.
All right, brilliantly said. Okay, don't
Thank
forget to like, comment, share. All right, that wraps up another episode of the Teacher Surgery. Let's go. Thank you. All right.